"I'm your mother," I said. "Not some stranger you edited out." Ava stared like she didn't recognize me, or didn't want to. "You lit candles for the dead," I added. "I was 5 miles away, very much alive." Her new husband moved to speak, until I dropped the trust amendment on the table. "I didn't disappear, you wrote me out, so I rewrote the ending." She looked up, finally understanding. This time, the story was mine. "All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from." She said I could watch through the live stream if I wanted, like I was some distant relative. Jeanette Parker sat motionless in the glow of her desk lamp, glasses low on her nose, rereading the email for the third time as if the words might soften with repetition. But there it was, in sleek cursive formatting and a pale blush-pink header. "Due to limited seating, we kindly ask extended family to enjoy the live stream from home." The words may as well have been dipped in acid. She wasn't extended family, she was the mother of the bride. The cursor hovered over the RSVP link like it might bite her. Below it, in fine print, "No exceptions. Kindly no calls about guest list changes." The sting didn't feel fresh, but it still bled. Ava had been slipping away since the engagement. Not abruptly, quietly, subtly. First, fewer calls, then cold replies, then silence dressed up in politeness, like this email. Jeanette exhaled, her breath catching in her chest. Her left hand clenched the edge of the mahogany desk while her right drifted to the edge of a photo frame. Crystal-cut glass, dustless, loyal. In it, Ava stood at 10 years old in a white piano recital dress, her front teeth slightly gapped, her eyes shining with something that felt like love. She let the weight of the picture steady her as she clicked the link to Ava's bridal website. An orchestral melody swelled in the background as the page loaded. Soft pastel tones, curated engagement photos in vineyards and on sailboats, a countdown clock ticking toward June 10th. "Meet the bride and groom." Jeanette scrolled slowly. Ava's bio spoke of her blessed upbringing and amazing mentors, and a mother-in-law who had become like a second mom. Jeanette's name appeared nowhere, not even in the acknowledgments. For a brief moment, she considered clicking away, turning off the screen, refusing to let this be real. But instead, she clicked Registry. The list was long and bloated with extravagance. Champagne flutes hand-blown in Italy, monogrammed bathrobes, a $5,000 espresso machine tagged, "Reserved by Mom." Jeanette froze. She hadn't reserved anything. Her phone buzzed with a text. Mark, her son, "Saw the email. Don't take it personally, it's just optics. Her in-laws are a lot." Optics. That word again. She typed back quickly, then erased it, typed again, deleted. There wasn't a right thing to say when someone tried to erase you with civility. She stood up slowly, knees cracking, and moved toward the kitchen. The wood floor creaked in the quiet like it hadn't since her husband Henry passed 4 years ago. He would have had something sharp and righteous to say about all this. She opened the freezer, reached for the vodka she didn't need, then closed it again. Instead, she walked into her study and sat back down with more resolve than before. Her hand moved to the bottom drawer, the one that stuck slightly because Henry had overfilled it with tax documents and his treasured pen collection. She pulled it open and sifted through manila folders until one caught her eye. Trust disbursement. Pending review. She pulled it out carefully. The edges were crisp, untouched. Inside was the paperwork Henry had drawn up a decade ago. A trust for both kids, managed solely by Jeanette until they were of appropriate age and life stage. Life stage. The term had seemed so warm and ceremonial back then. College, a first home, marriage. It hadn't factored in being edited out of her own daughter's wedding slideshow. Jeanette flipped through the pages, fingers steady. It wasn't just a document. It was a lever, a key. She looked up at the picture of Ava on the shelf again, this time her lips tightening. She reached for a pen, not to sign anything, but to underline a single clause Henry had insisted on including: all disbursements pending the trustee's approval, based on good faith familial participation. She leaned back in the leather chair, the flicker in her chest no longer sorrow, but something colder, sharper, purposeful. She looked toward the espresso machine on the screen again, and this time she laughed, a short, bitter sound that echoed in the empty room. Then she reached for her phone, not to text, not to call, but to take a photo of the file. One image, just in case. And just as she hit save, her finger brushed across a second folder, marked only with Ava's name and a date she hadn't seen before. She opens a file marked, Trust Disbursement, Pending Review. She erased me from the wedding, but she forgot who built her college fund and who controls the trust. The morning sun pushed stubbornly through the linen blinds, scattering light across Jeanette's kitchen table like an unwanted guest. Her coffee had gone cold beside the manila folder she'd left open from the night before. The top page was still folded neatly at the corner, a habit Henry had always had, like leaving breadcrumbs in a forest of legal jargon. Her finger hovered over the section labeled Final Disbursement. Amount, $125,000. Purpose, Major Life Milestone, pending trustee approval. Beneficiary, Ava Parker. A slow breath left her lips as her thumb tapped against the table's edge. Milestone, she murmured aloud. Milestone, not marriage. She reached across the table for her phone and dialed the only number she trusted to cut through the fog of old documents and emotional landmines. 3 rings. Then a calm, clipped voice. Geller Law Office. It's Jeanette Parker, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. I need to review the terms of my daughter's trust. I have the original file. I just want to confirm I'm not imagining what I'm reading. There was a pause, then, Of course, Mrs. Parker. Ms. Geller has time this morning. Jeanette hadn't been to the estate office since Henry's funeral arrangements. The space still smelled of antique paper and polished wood. Ms. Geller looked just the same, severe bob, burgundy lipstick, one of those women who always looked like she'd just stepped off a courtroom podium. Jeanette slid the folder across the desk. Page 5, the clause about disbursement. Geller adjusted her glasses, skimmed silently, then tapped her manicured nail twice on the margin. You're correct. The funds are yours to release or withhold until you sign off or until a court compels it. But unless Ava has cause for litigation, and she doesn't, you remain the controlling trustee. Jeanette leaned back. She hasn't spoken to me in 6 months. Not a call, not a card. But she made sure to label an espresso machine, reserved by Mom, on her registry. Geller smirked without humor. Let me guess. Top-tier chrome finish? $5,000? Jeanette nodded, lips tight. She's signaling, Geller said. Passive-aggressive tactics wrapped in social niceties. You'd be amazed how often that happens when money's at the end of the aisle. Jeanette folded her arms. I raised a girl who knew how to write thank-you notes. Now she edits me out of her wedding and assumes I'll bankroll it anyway? She assumes wrong. Silence hung in the air like humidity before a storm. Jeanette stood, slipping the file back into her tote. I want you to draft a notice of hold. Just procedural. I'm not saying I won't release it, but I'm saying not yet. Geller raised an eyebrow. You're drawing a line. No, Jeanette said, adjusting the strap on her shoulder. I'm building a boundary. She can decide whether to cross it. Outside, the sky was bright, but the air had turned cold. She walked slowly to her car, hand skimming the dusty hood before unlocking the door. Back home, she opened her laptop and returned to the bridal site. She scrolled again. Registry. The espresso machine stared back at her, gleaming in its showroom photo, captioned in elegant script, A gift from my mother. Our mornings will taste like love. Jeanette stared at the screen for a full minute. Then she clicked print. Not the page, the entire registry. As the machine hummed to life behind her, the room felt heavier. The photos, the silence, the unacknowledged sacrifices lining the walls like invisible wallpaper. She walked to the living room, pulled an old photo album from the shelf, one with Ava's crayon drawings taped to the inside cover, and sat down, flipping pages slowly, methodically. She wasn't sure what the next move was, but she knew this. Money was power, but memory was currency. Ava had stolen one. Jeanette still held the other. Ava's wedding registry includes a $5,000 espresso machine, marked Reserved by Mom. They took my memories and edited me out, so I started creating new ones. Of the truth. Jeanette stepped through the doors of La Belle Mariée with the stillness of someone approaching a grave, not a boutique. The scent inside was powdery sweet, floral perfume, steamed silk, expensive candles trying too hard to say elegance. Her low heels clicked against marble tile as she scanned the room, eyes pausing on a crystal chandelier too grand for a place that sold dresses. A young stylist looked up from behind the front desk, her smile practiced. "Welcome. Shopping for a special day?" Jeanette returned the smile, cool but measured. "For my niece," she said, smoothing her navy sweater. "She's a second-time bride." Something understated. "She's older now. More aware." The stylist tilted her head slightly. "Of course. We've got a few private racks perfect for that." Jeanette's gaze drifted behind the woman, toward a wall filled with framed photos. Real brides, all posed in a halo of tulle and curated joy. And then she saw it. Avenue front and center. Wearing a satin robe embroidered with Mrs. Layton-to-be, standing arm in arm with her fiancé's mother, Linda. Matching pink slippers, holding champagne flutes. Ava's smile stretched wide, and Jeanette recognized it, not because it was happy, because it was careful. The stylist followed her gaze and shifted, uncomfortable. "Oh, that was such a sweet appointment. Your niece wouldn't happen to be Ava Parker, would she?" Jeanette's expression didn't flicker. "No," she said softly. "Different Ava." The stylist gave a tight nod and turned toward the display rack. "Well, let me show you some options. We've had a lot of new arrivals from—" "Actually," Jeanette interrupted, her voice low but firm. "I was curious, when did the Layton party come in? Was it recent?" The stylist hesitated, then reached for the edge of her sleeve, tugging it nervously. "It's policy not to discuss other clients, especially high-profile ones. I hope you understand." Jeanette smiled with the kind of grace that only comes from long-buried rage. "Of course, I'd never ask you to break policy." She let the moment sit, then turned away slowly. "On second thought, I think I'll let my niece pick her own dress. You know how opinionated second-timers can be." Back outside, the late morning wind cut across Jeanette's face, sharp and dry. The street smelled like coffee and car exhaust, life moving around her as if her daughter hadn't just rewritten family history inside that boutique. She crossed the street, entered the corner drugstore, and headed straight to the card aisle. Not the wedding section, no doves, no glittery script. She picked one from the blank collection. Simple ivory, no text, no embellishments, just weight. At home, she sat at her desk, lit by the cold gray light of early afternoon, and pulled the card from its envelope. She wrote in ink the same way she'd once packed Ava's lunches, carefully, without expecting thanks. "You made your decision. Now I'll make mine." She folded a copy of the trust clause, the one Geller had highlighted in red, and slid it inside. No note, no signature, only the truth. She sealed the envelope and placed it on the table beside her framed photo of young Ava, still smiling in her recital dress. She tapped the edge of the frame once with her finger, a silent ritual, then stood and moved to her computer. Curious more than angry, she typed Ava's name into Instagram. There she was, in a new post, radiant, edited, filtered to candlelight gold, wearing a sash that read "Bride-to-be," surrounded by peonies and a woman in the same pink robe from the boutique photo. Caption, "Grateful for the real women who raised me. Bride tribe. Blessed. Family first." Jeanette stared at the screen. Her heart didn't race, her hands didn't shake. Instead, she exhaled, slow and deliberate, and whispered to no one, "Good." Because now it was official. Now it was war. Ava posts a bridal caption, "Grateful for the real women who raised me." She posed for legacy shots while I sat behind a screen, but I know the photographer and the invoice. Jeanette's fingers hovered over the keyboard, heart thudding in a way that was neither fear nor excitement, just a sharp, surgical precision of purpose. The espresso machine was still fresh in her mind, as was the caption, "The real women who raised me." That wasn't forgetfulness, that was a scalpel. She typed the name she hadn't thought of in nearly 9 years, Matthew Cole Photography. The search results populated fast. The top hit, official photographer for the Leighton Parker wedding. There was a headshot on the site. Matt, older now, beard thicker, but unmistakably the same kid she'd pushed to apply for that grant when he was just a broke barista with a second-hand Canon and a dream. She'd written his recommendation letter herself, edited his first portfolio, even proofread his artist statement when he didn't know where to put the apostrophes. Jeanette clicked contact, paused. Then, instead of the form, she dug out her email. Subject, remember me? Matt, you may not realize you're shooting the wedding of my daughter, Ava. I helped you get your first camera grant back in 2014. I'm not asking for anything disruptive, just a favor. If there's a family archive being assembled, I'd like to see if I'm in it. Jeanette Parker. She reread it once, professional, neutral, a scalpel of her own, then hit send. She didn't have to wait long. Reply from Matt Cole. Jeanette, of course I remember you. Honestly, you're the reason I ever had a shot. Yes, I'm shooting Ava's wedding, and I have to admit, I didn't realize the connection until just now. I can send you the family groupings folder, but full transparency, they didn't include you in the pre-wedding slideshow either. I remember because Ava specifically said to crop one image. I'm sorry, I'll send you what I can, no charge, no trace. Matt. Jeanette didn't move. Her hand tightened around the armrest of her chair. She wasn't angry. Anger was clean. This was something thicker, older, something that had moss on it. Crop one image. The memory came uninvited. Ava at 5, running barefoot through the park in an overalls dress, pigtails bouncing as she screamed, "Take a picture, Mommy!" Jeanette had snapped it without thinking. It wasn't art, but it was real. Matt sent the folder within the hour. Zip file, high res, nothing labeled. Jeanette opened the archive like she was opening an attic that hadn't been touched in years. Dozens of photos, Ava in ivory lace, Ava with her fiancé, silhouetted in golden hour lighting. Ava with Linda, the second mother, helping her into heels, holding her veil. Jeanette flipped through them like pages in a book she hadn't been allowed to read. Then, almost hidden in a subfolder marked Early Submissions, she saw it. Ava, age 5, overalls, barefoot, laughing mid-run. Jeanette froze. That was her photo. She remembered the moment, the angle, the cheap camera. Ava had submitted this for the slideshow, and then told the photographer to crop her out. Jeanette stared at it for a long time, the corners of her eyes burning. Not from sadness, from the truth of it. She opened Facebook, not to post publicly, not yet, but to upload it privately. She wrote nothing dramatic, no hashtags, just one caption. Before she knew how to forget me. She hit post, visible only to her close friends group, mostly women her age, many of them mothers, a few who had watched their own children turn into strangers. The photo hovered on the screen like a ghost, finally given a name, and before she closed the laptop, her inbox pinged again. A new message. From Matt. I found something else. Thought you'd want to see it. Sending now. She posts it privately on Facebook, before she knew how to forget me. She didn't want me in the ballroom. I walked into the boardroom instead. Jeanette sat at the end of the polished oak conference table, her fingers gently tracing the grain of the wood as if it might offer a sense of grounding. Outside the office window, the world continued without noticing. Commuters moved through the cold morning, bundled against the wind, while inside, a quiet, deliberate shift was about to take place. Across from her, Ms. Geller reviewed the paperwork with a red pen and a cautious eye, the kind of legal precision Jeanette had come to appreciate in recent weeks. The document between them, the trust disbursement clause, was no longer just a formality. It was leverage, not used out of vengeance but necessity. A line had been crossed, and now she was drawing one back. The clause is airtight, Geller said, her voice even, almost gentle. You're not blocking the trust outright. You're initiating a formal pause. No disbursement can proceed until Ava participates in a documented, good-faith familial meeting. That's the language we've used. It's sound. Jeanette nodded, her eyes on the signature line. And if she refuses the meeting? Then the disbursement remains frozen, Geller replied, sliding the pen across the table. Indefinitely, if necessary. Jeanette picked up the pen with steady fingers. She didn't rush. The act of signing her name didn't bring satisfaction, only a quiet, unspoken resolve. Ava had made her intentions known, not through confrontation, but omission. Jeanette's name was missing from the program, the slideshow, the speeches, and the seating plan. But she was far from irrelevant. In fact, legally, she was essential. As the pen lifted off the paper, something shifted, not just in the room, but inside her. The part of Jeanette that had once hoped for reconciliation, the mother who'd waited for a call or a card or even a moment of honesty, had finally stood up and walked away. What remained was someone older, sharper, and no longer afraid to act. "I'll have this filed with the executor this afternoon," Geller said, tucking the signed form into a folder with a neat flick of her wrist. "And we'll send a copy to Ava's legal representative, quietly, professionally." "Subject line?" Jeanette asked. Geller smiled faintly. "To be discussed, trust access. That should do it." Jeanette gathered her coat and bag without ceremony. Before she left, she turned back to Geller. "And the registry. That espresso machine?" "I'd advise addressing that separately," Geller replied, lifting an eyebrow. "I already have a letter," Jeanette said. "I'll deliver it myself." That afternoon, Jeanette walked through the glittering glass doors of Crate and Hearth, the upscale home store where Ava's registry had been created. The warmth of the store did little to thaw the cool detachment she carried as she approached the concierge desk. She handed the envelope to the young woman behind the counter, who opened it and read silently, her expression shifting from polite confusion to professional discomfort. Inside the letter was a formal request to remove all items labeled "Reserved by Mom," along with a clarification that Jeanette had not committed to any contributions or acknowledgments related to the registry. "No issue," the associate said quickly, folding the letter and placing it in a tray behind the desk. "We'll update the list today." Jeanette thanked her and turned to leave, her heels clicking on the tile, echoing through the curated quiet of the store. Outside, the wind was bitter, but she barely noticed it. The old feeling of being excluded no longer carried weight, not when she'd just pulled up a chair at a different kind of table. That evening, back at home, she made tea and settled at her kitchen table. The kettle hissed low and steady behind her. She wasn't expecting communication so soon, but her phone vibrated on the counter. An email had arrived from Nathan Layton. Subject: "This is petty and cruel. We'll go around you." Jeanette read the message slowly, eyes scanning every word of the groom's scolding tone. He accused her of weaponizing money, accused her of ruining a joyous moment, claimed they didn't need her, didn't need permission, and would find a way around her. She didn't respond. Instead, she forwarded the message to Geller with a short note. "Please ensure the executor sees this." Then she closed her laptop, sipped her tea, and listened to the wind rattle faintly against the windows. Ava's fiancé emails Jeanette, "This is petty and cruel. We'll go around you." They lit candles for absent relatives. I was 5 miles away. The glow from Jeanette's laptop screen bathed the living room in cold light, flickering faintly like a dying candle. She hadn't turned on the lamps. The rest of the house sat in quiet shadow, as if trying to remain uninvolved. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard as the countdown on the wedding livestream approached 0. She hadn't committed to watching, not aloud, not even to herself, but here she was, knees tucked beneath her on the couch, mug of untouched tea cooling on the side table, watching the digital feed connect. The first image came into focus. A sprawling estate venue dressed in cascading white florals, soft gold accents, and the kind of symmetry that screamed money more than meaning. A string quartet played off-camera, every note too perfect to feel personal. The video panned to guests taking their seats, soft chatter, glances exchanged beneath carefully done hair and borrowed heirlooms. Jeanette watched silently, her breath shallow, waiting for something. A glance, a name, a nod, anything. But when the officiant began his welcome, his voice warm and rehearsed, the words were practiced to the point of emptiness. We gather today to witness the union of two families, two legacies, two hearts joined by love. She saw Linda first, Ava's soon-to-be mother-in-law, escorted to her seat with a small bouquet of white lilies in hand. The camera paused on her. There was no caption, but Jeanette didn't need one. It was an introduction by image. She watched as the photographer, no doubt Matt, captured the moment with practiced subtlety. A few minutes in, the officiant's tone softened. At this time, we light candles in memory of the loved ones who could not be with us today, especially grandparents and family members who have passed but remain forever in spirit. The candle lighter, some cousin Jeanette had never met, moved with reverence down the aisle, placing flames before framed portraits at the altar. The names were read one by one. Henry's was there, Ava's late grandmother, a great-uncle. Jeanette's was not. She wasn't dead, of course, but she had clearly been classified among the missing. Her lips pressed together as she reached for her tea, now lukewarm, and placed it gently in the sink without drinking. She didn't turn back to the laptop. She didn't need to hear the vows. She already knew they wouldn't include the word mother, not in reference to her. She returned to the living room, opened the side cabinet, and pulled down a long-forgotten shoebox from the back of the shelf. The cardboard lid was stained along one corner from a leaky attic pipe years ago. But inside, everything remained untouched. Baby photos, hand-drawn cards, a felt puppet Ava made in second grade that looked more like a sock than a rabbit. Jeanette sat at the dining table with the box open in front of her, the live stream still playing silently in another room, forgotten like a bad dream. One by one, she began spreading the contents across the table. She didn't rush. She read the scribbles on each letter, studied the dates, touched the corners of folded report cards and wrinkled ballet programs. She added a small note of her own, just a single typed sentence clipped to the top of the collection. "Since she no longer remembers, I thought you might like to know where she came from." Then she took a manila envelope, carefully packed the box's contents inside, and sealed it with brown tape. No return address, no name. That night, she drove it to the 24-hour post office in a different zip code, the box riding shotgun like a silent witness. At the counter, she filled in the address of the Layton residence, the estate Ava would soon call home. "Insurance?" the postal clerk asked, glancing at her over the rim of his glasses. "No," Jeanette replied, sliding the box toward him. "There's nothing in there I could replace." The postmark stamped down with a soft, final thud. She mails it anonymously to Ava's in-laws. They waited for the envelope with my name. It never arrived. The card box sat at the edge of the long white linen table, like a relic from a different time. Its gold-trimmed slot designed for well wishes, quiet blessings, and checks folded in half. The morning after the wedding, Ava stood in the center of her and Nathan's shared apartment, still in her silk getting-ready robe, peeling cards open one by one. The gifts were generous, as expected. Her father-in-law's law firm had contributed a honeymoon upgrade. Her college roommate enclosed a framed Polaroid from the bachelorette weekend and a note that read, "For your future fireplace mantle." From Linda, of course, there was the signature cursive on thick ivory stock. "To a daughter in spirit, may this be the beginning of everything you deserve." She flipped each envelope carefully, as if trying to will Jeanette's handwriting to appear on one, but with each new opening, a quiet hollowness settled in her chest. By the end of the stack, the silence around her was absolute. Nathan walked in, tie undone, holding his phone and chewing on the edge of a granola bar. Did she send anything? Ava didn't look up. Number nothing. "You sure?" "She didn't even text," Ava murmured, brushing her thumb over a gold-foiled thank you card someone had left blank inside. "Not even a line." Nathan sat down at the counter, eyes narrowing. "You told me she'd probably still give the trust, that she wouldn't want to make this ugly." Ava didn't answer immediately. She stood in front of the window, her silhouette framed by a sunbeam that felt unearned. "She's hurt," she said finally. Nathan dropped the granola bar onto a plate. "Yeah, well, we're broke. Between the venue deposit and your brother's flight rebookings and the espresso machine that never showed up, we've got about 2 months before this apartment becomes aspirational." Ava turned to him, her eyes glassy. "I never thought she'd actually cut herself out. I didn't think she'd—" Nathan didn't soften. "You need to call her." Ava looked down at her phone for a long time. Then she opened a new message. "Hi, Mom. Can we meet next week to discuss the trust paperwork?" She didn't include a "How are you?" or even an apology. She read the message twice, then hit send before she could second-guess it. The reply came 4 minutes later. Not instant, not delayed, just cold. "You planned without me. Keep planning." Ava sat back in the chair, phone still in hand. Her throat tightened around the edges, a sensation that felt more like panic than grief. "She replied," she whispered. Nathan looked over. "And?" she said to keep planning. For the first time that morning, his voice wavered. "What does that mean?" Ava didn't respond. She just put the phone down on the table like it was too hot to hold. The sunlight outside had shifted, dragging a line of shadow across her lap. She didn't move from it. Across town, in the office of Geller and Bloom, a certified letter sat open on the polished desk of the trust's executor. The document was brief but unequivocal. In light of the beneficiary's refusal to engage in direct familial communication, the final disbursement shall remain frozen under the terms of the Parker Family Trust, Section 7B, stamped, filed, and delivered. Jeanette had not said a word beyond that. She didn't need to. That evening, Ava stared at the registry website, scrolling past the espresso machine that still sat marked unfulfilled. She hovered over the listing, then clicked Remove from List. For a long moment afterward, she just sat in silence, staring at the blinking cursor on her laptop. The apartment around her was filled with unopened boxes, half-written thank you notes, and the echo of something deeply unfinished. The executor formally freezes the disbursement. They raised a toast to new beginnings. I reopened what they buried. The morning after the card box fiasco, Ava sat at a long, whitewashed table beneath a canopy of lemon trees and fairy lights strung across the Leighton Estate's private garden. The air smelled like overripe citrus and hollandaise sauce, the sweetness just beginning to sour. A server passed with a silver tray of blood orange mimosas, and someone at the end of the table made a joke about how love tasted better with champagne. Ava smiled politely. Her new husband leaned in, whispering something about keeping up appearances. Her laugh came late and flat. The brunch was meant to be a soft landing, a curated moment of calm after the whirlwind of the ceremony, the reception, the avalanche of Instagram posts and digital validation. It was, by all accounts, a success. Until it wasn't. They'd just finished their second course, smoked salmon Benedict with a kale chive salad, when the topic turned, gently at first, then with weight. "So," said Ellen, Ava's grandmother on her father's side, her tone innocent but edged with ice. "Your mother. Jeanette, right? I kept waiting to see her yesterday. Was she unwell?" Ava froze for half a second. She hadn't rehearsed this moment, hadn't thought Ellen, with her soft cardigans and firm opinions, would be the one to ask. "She wasn't able to attend," Ava said carefully. "It's complicated." Ellen reached for her teacup but didn't take a sip. Her gray eyes held Ava's like a ledger being balanced. "I don't think it's complicated. She raised you, didn't she?" Ava opened her mouth but nothing came out. Her husband stepped in. "There were a lot of moving pieces. Planning got hectic and it just—" Ellen cut him off without raising her voice. "I've seen a lot of weddings in my life, Nathan. The good ones include everyone who built the foundation, not just the decorators." A quiet fell over the table. Forks paused midair. The clink of a glass being set down too hard echoed unnaturally loud. Ava set her napkin in her lap with too much force and said, "It wasn't a punishment. We just wanted it to feel streamlined." Her cousin across the table whispered to her husband, not quietly enough, "Streamlined doesn't mean amputated." And that was it. That was the shift. The unspoken began to bubble up, awkward and ugly in daylight. Later, when the guests had thinned and the sun started warming the patio into something less picturesque, Ava sat alone at the garden table, glass of untouched, sparkling cider sweating onto her silk dress. Her phone was face down beside her, but the tension had gathered at the nape of her neck like a warning. She flipped it over. One missed call, one voicemail, from her mother. Except no, she had called. Ava played the message she'd left earlier that morning after brunch had broken into whispers and glances. Her own voice came through faint, cracked at the edges. "Mom, I'm not calling about the money, I'm not. God, this isn't coming out right. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought keeping things simple would make everything easier. But I think I made it worse. I should have had you there. I see that now. I'm sorry, I don't know how to come back from it." She let the recording play out in her hand, eyes flickering toward the lemon trees that had seemed so whimsical just hours earlier, now casting long, fractured shadows across the tablecloth. Across town, Jeanette sat in her kitchen, the light outside falling soft through the blinds, casting streaks on the floor like folded ribbon. The voicemail was open on her phone, replayed once, then again. Listened to not as a promise, but as proof. She didn't cry. She didn't call back. She simply tapped the heart icon beside the message, downloaded it, and moved it to a protected folder on her desktop labeled Family Archive. Then she renamed the file. Insurance. Jeanette saves the voice. Mail. One word. Insurance. They thought the money was promised. I remembered it was protected. The envelope sat unopened on the dining room table for 3 hours. Jeanette didn't rush it. Instead, she made a full breakfast. Eggs soft scrambled with goat cheese, buttered toast, and a half grapefruit dusted with sugar. She brewed coffee in the same pot Henry had used for decades, its glass belly darkened with time. The house was still, windows closed, the heater clicking faintly beneath the floorboards like an old watch counting something down. When she finally sliced the envelope open, the contents were clean and quiet. The trust rewrite, printed on watermarked legal stock. The top line read, "Amendment to the Parker Family Trust effective immediately. Jeanette L. Parker, sole trustee." She ran her finger down the margin, finding the key clauses already marked in red by Geller. Ava's portion, once set at a full 50% of the estate upon marriage, was now reduced to a third. Another third was redirected into a grant program for elder care innovation. The final third was earmarked for a scholarship fund in Henry's name to support first-generation college students majoring in engineering just like he had. It wasn't an erasure. It was a redistribution, a realignment of purpose. Jeanette signed the bottom in steady strokes. No trembling, no hesitation. The pen clicked shut like a vault door. Across town, Nathan's phone buzzed with the force of an incoming storm. He picked it up, brows furrowing at the unfamiliar number. "Hello? This is Geller Law," a voice replied. "We're reaching out to confirm receipt of the amended trust documents. Jeanette Parker has executed her rights as sole trustee. If your household has questions, we're happy to set up a meeting." Nathan barely got a thank you out before ending the call. He stood in the middle of their kitchen, the echo of the conversation bouncing off stone countertops and glass front cabinets. Ava was seated at the island, sipping what remained of a warm mimosa, her phone dark beside her. "Well?" she asked, not looking up. "They rewrote it," he said flatly. "Your share's been slashed. The rest is going to charities, grants, elder funding." Ava blinked slowly, her face unreadable. "She wouldn't—" "She did," Nathan snapped. "This is punishment, Ava." Ava exhaled sharply, then pushed the mimosa aside. "It's not about money." Nathan stared at her. "It's literally about money." She paused, lips parted like a thought had formed but hadn't chosen a shape yet. "She's making a point. She wants control. This isn't about the espresso machine or the invite. She wants to be needed again." Nathan's jaw clenched. "Needed? She rewrote your future." But Ava shook her head, quietly. She preserved hers. Back in her own kitchen, Jeanette filed the signed document into her fireproof lockbox, tucked between Henry's will and the deed to the house. The act didn't feel triumphant, it felt finished, like setting a painting on the wall after years of moving it from one room to another. Her phone rang 15 minutes later. Nathan. She didn't answer. Then it buzzed again, this time with a voicemail. Jeanette, this is absurd. You're punishing Ava for a few bad decisions? For what? Image management? You raised a strong woman, and now you're cutting her off because she didn't put your name on a brochure? You're not preserving anything. You're just burning it down. Jeanette listened once. Then she pressed save. Not out of spite, but for the record. People remembered things differently when the stakes rose. She didn't call him back. Instead, she opened her blinds. The sun had finally broken through the clouds, striping her dining room in pale gold. She carried her coffee to the window and stood there for a while, watching two neighborhood kids ride their bikes past her driveway, backpacks bouncing. She wondered if they had mothers who made them come home before the streetlights came on. She had raised her daughter with those rules once, and still, somehow, found herself erased. Her phone buzzed once more. A single text from Ava. What do you want? Jeanette didn't respond right away. She stared at the question for a long time, the screen glowing in her palm like a small, flickering door. Ava sends a text. What do you want? She offered brunch. I offered boundaries. The email came in the early morning, short and overly polite, as if Ava were reaching out to a former professor instead of her mother. Subject: quick lunch? Hi, Mom. Would you be open to meeting at Mill and Maple this week? Just to talk. Lunch is on me. Hope you're well. Ava Jeanette stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like a silent metronome. There was no warmth in the message, no apology, not even acknowledgement of the question she hadn't answered. What do you want? Still, something in her stomach turned, not nerves, not anticipation, but the echo of a familiar ache. She clicked reply. Sure, Tuesday at noon. I'll be on time. 2 days later, Jeanette stepped into Mill and Maple, a small upscale cafe with reclaimed wood tables and chalkboard menus written in a font that tried too hard to feel casual. The air smelled like fresh rosemary and grilled sourdough, and the hostess, young, glossy, greeted her with a smile that had nothing to do with kindness. Welcome. Are you meeting someone? My daughter, Jeanette replied. She should be here already. Sure enough, Ava sat in the back corner booth, wearing a cream blouse and blazer, tapping her phone like the world couldn't start until she allowed it. Jeanette approached slowly, giving herself a moment to study the posture, the expression, the subtle armor of someone who'd rehearsed the entire encounter in her head. Ava looked up and smiled, not wide, not warm, just practiced. Thanks for coming, she said, motioning to the seat across from her. Jeanette slid into the booth, setting her purse beside her. You said you wanted to talk? The waiter arrived, breaking the tension briefly. They ordered. Ava, the grilled chicken salad with citrus dressing. Jeanette, just a cup of black coffee. When he walked away, Ava leaned in slightly. I know this has all gotten out of hand. I just wanted to say it wasn't personal. The wedding planning, it was messy. And complicated. Jeanette raised an eyebrow. So complicated you forgot to say my name? Ava flushed, her fingers tightening around her glass of water. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about making things easy. Jeanette's laugh was quiet and dry. For whom? Ava looked away, blinking quickly. I didn't mean for it to hurt you. Jeanette reached into her bag and pulled out a white envelope. She placed it on the table between them, carefully, like setting down a chess piece. I'm not here to make a scene, Jeanette said. This isn't a guilt trip or a pitch, but I won't let you rewrite what happened and call it neutral. Ava stared at the envelope but didn't reach for it. What is it? Something to read. Later. If you're ready to have a real conversation. Ava opened her mouth, but Jeanette stood before she could speak. I'll leave you with the check, she said. And the next move. Without waiting for a response, Jeanette turned and walked out of the cafe, the soft bell above the door chiming behind her. The sun had broken through the clouds outside, too bright for how the moment felt. She pulled on her coat and kept walking, not once looking back. Inside, Ava sat frozen, the envelope like a stone on the table. After a long silence, she tucked it into her purse and paid the bill with a card that still bore her maiden name. She didn't open the envelope until she was in her car, the engine off, her hands trembling slightly as she peeled it open. Inside was a stack of printed voicemail transcripts, her own words, or lack of them, dozens of missed calls, messages left by Jeanette, notes of birthdays, medical updates, check-ins, all ignored. At the top of the stack was a note written in her mother's unmistakable handwriting. "Before you ask for anything real, start by answering what you already missed." Ava opens it in the car. It's a printout of every voicemail she never returned. "They curated their image. I edited the truth." The cursor blinked steadily against the dark video editing timeline, a silent metronome marking the finality of Jeanette's decision. Her reading glasses slid down the bridge of her nose as she adjusted the playback window, her fingers steady over the keyboard. The first image flickered to life. A grainy clip of Ava at 6 years old, face sticky with frosting, holding up a lopsided birthday cake she'd decorated by herself. Jeanette's voice could be heard faintly in the background, laughing, proud, real. It was one of the many videos Ava had submitted herself, long ago, to the wedding videographer. Jeanette had remembered Matt's quiet note in the email. She included them all, but asked to crop you out. Even the old ones. Jeanette hadn't been angry then, but now, watching her daughter try to revise a life in retrospect, she felt something deeper than fury. This wasn't vengeance. This was restoration. Clip by clip, she stitched together the childhood Ava had tried to amputate. A snowy front yard with a crooked snowman and tiny pink mittens. A school play where Ava wore angel wings too large for her body and waved at the camera with an excited grin. The pool party where she cannonballed in floaties, emerging with waterlogged cheeks and a scream of joy. Jeanette was always behind the camera, her voice steady, warm, encouraging, invisible, but not absent. For the final layer, Jeanette dragged in the audio file of Ava's voicemail, the one she'd left after brunch. The words were raw, halting. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought keeping things simple would make everything easier, but I think I made it worse. I should have had you there. I see that now. I'm sorry. I don't know how to come back from it." Jeanette did. Add commentary. No narration, no captions, just Ava's voice over the life she'd tried to mute. A montage of memories that couldn't be erased with a curated website or a white floral runner. She saved the video under the title, "Before She Forgot the Beginning." It took less than an hour to upload it into a closed Facebook group she'd quietly joined months ago, Estranged Mothers Circle, private, verified only, a digital sanctuary filled with quiet heartbreaks, long silences, and women who whispered their grief in comment threads and found comfort in each other's echoes. Jeanette didn't post a dramatic caption, just a line that read, "For every mother who was written out of the ending, this was our beginning." She didn't expect much. A few reactions, maybe a comment or two. But within 24 hours, the video had been shared across dozens of subgroups, grief support forums, parenting message boards, private therapy circles. It didn't go public. It didn't need to. It went deep. The comments poured in. "This made me sob. My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 3 years. I thought I was the only one who had to grieve someone still living. Thank you for putting what I couldn't say into something I can send." Jeanette read them all, not out of vanity, but because every note felt like a brick laid under her feet. Not revenge, reinforcement. Late one evening, as she was steeping chamomile tea and preparing to turn in, her phone buzzed on the counter. A new notification. A message from someone she didn't know. She tapped the preview. "Linda Layton has forwarded you a link." Her hand froze on the kettle handle. She opened the message. "Jeanette, I saw this video today. I don't know what's happened between you and Ava, but I watched this twice and I cried both times. I thought you should know I've sent it to her. I hope she watches it the whole way through." Jeanette didn't reply. She didn't need to. Instead, she walked into the living room, sat beside the framed photo of Ava as a child, the same photo from her desk, and let the silence hold her. Not empty, not lonely, just full of everything that had been true, whether Ava was ready to remember it or not. Someone forwards the link to Ava's in-laws. He said, "You've made your point." I said, "No, I made history." The phone rang late, close to midnight, when most apologies are too raw, and most demands come cloaked in desperation. Jeanette glanced at the screen. Nathan Layton. No message, no text, just the call. She let it ring 4 times, then answered with the calm of someone who already knew exactly how the conversation would go. Jeanette speaking. The silence on the other end stretched for a moment, as if he were weighing whether to speak or hang up. Then, "It's Nathan." Her tone didn't change. I gathered. "I'm calling because," he began, then stopped, exhaling hard through his nose. "Whatever this is, it's gone far enough. The video, the trust, the letters. You've made your point." Jeanette rose from her chair and crossed to the window, pulling the curtain slightly open. Outside, her yard was blanketed in moonlight, shadows of the oak tree brushing across the grass like reaching arms. "You think this is about a point?" she asked, voice quiet but sharp. "Nathan, this isn't some parlor trick. I'm not trying to win. I'm preserving what was mine to begin with." He laughed, but it held no humor. "You're putting Ava through hell. She can't sleep. She's embarrassed, humiliated, and now her parents-in-law are questioning her version of everything." "They should," Jeanette said simply. She was trying to move on, he said louder now. To start fresh. With a story that cut her mother out of the picture? Jeanette turned from the window, pacing now, her slippers soft against the hardwood. "You all wanted me invisible, but you forgot I own the negatives. Every reel, every photograph, every moment you tried to recast without me, I kept the originals." There was another pause. Then his voice dropped. "You made a video and tossed it into a circle of grieving strangers like it was nothing. You weaponized nostalgia." Jeanette stopped walking, her gaze locked on the photo frame atop her bookshelf. Ava at 7, wearing a crooked paper crown, frosting on her cheek, a missing front tooth. That memory hadn't been curated. It had simply been true. "No," she said, "I made history, quietly, accurately, unfiltered." Nathan sighed again. "Just take it down, before it gets worse." Jeanette didn't blink. "What you're feeling right now? That edge? That discomfort? That's the feeling of being made aware, not attacked. Aware." Nathan didn't reply. "You want this to stop?" she asked. "Then I suggest you let Ava speak for herself, or better yet, listen, for once." She ended the call without waiting for a goodbye. Jeanette stood there for a while in the dark, her phone still in hand, her breathing slow and deliberate. The silence that followed was not peace. It was presence. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't begged. She'd held her ground with the poise of a woman who had been erased, then restored herself, pixel by pixel, word by word. She set the phone on the table and turned off the lights. Upstairs, the house creaked the way old houses do, not broken, just remembering. As she settled beneath the quilt Henry's mother had stitched before Ava was born, her phone buzzed again. Just once. A message. She rolled over, reached for it, and read the screen. "Ava, can we talk? Just us." Jeanette stared at the message for a long moment, her thumb hovering, not in hesitation, but in consideration, because for the first time, the silence Ava had built around them had finally cracked. Ava finally texts, "Can we talk? Just us." She said, "I didn't think you'd care this much." I said, "That was the problem." The wind stirred gently through the trees, rustling leaves that clung stubbornly to their branches, despite the creeping chill of early fall. Jeanette sat alone on a slatted park bench, her gloved hands resting in her lap, the tips of her fingers brushing the corner of a manila envelope peeking from her bag. A pair of children laughed in the distance, chasing each other past the duck pond, their voices light and aimless. The scent of damp earth and distant cinnamon from a nearby cart floated in the air, familiar and unplaceable at once. She glanced at her watch. 2 minutes past noon. Then she saw her. Ava walked up the gravel path slowly, her stride hesitant, her coat buttoned all the way to her chin like armor. She looked smaller than Jeanette remembered, less polished, less postured. No high heels, no blazer, no wedding glow, just a woman who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Jeanette didn't stand. She didn't need to. Ava approached the bench, stopping just short of sitting. Her hands fidgeted with the strap of her purse, her eyes lowered. "Hi," she said softly. "Hello, Ava." There was a long silence. The wind picked up, pushing a dry leaf against Ava's ankle. She stepped on it without noticing. "I wasn't sure if you'd come," Ava said at last. Jeanette tilted her head slightly. "You asked. I answered." Another beat passed before Ava finally sat down, leaving 2 inches of space between them, close enough for warmth, but not familiarity. She stared ahead, eyes fixed on the still water of the pond. I don't know what I thought," Ava murmured. "That if I just kept things easy, if I didn't stir the pot, everything would fall into place." Jeanette said nothing. Ava's voice cracked slightly. "I didn't think you'd care this much." Jeanette turned to her, her expression calm but razor sharp. That was the problem. Ava's eyes widened, but she didn't argue. Jeanette reached into her bag and pulled out the envelope. She placed it between them on the bench without flourish. The wind tried to lift the edge, but it stayed grounded by the weight of what it contained. "I'm not here to yell," Jeanette said. "I'm not here to guilt you. This," she nodded to the envelope, "is a copy of the revised trust. What's done is done. I didn't revoke your share. I restructured the legacy." Ava picked it up but didn't open it. Her hands trembled just slightly at the corners. "I didn't cut you out," Jeanette continued. "You stepped out. You chose a version of your life that didn't include me, and I let you make that choice. But you don't get to be shocked now that choices have consequences." "I didn't know it would hurt this much," Ava said, her voice barely audible. "I didn't think it would stick. I thought if I said sorry, things would just roll back." Jeanette gave her a long look. "Life doesn't roll back, Ava. It rebuilds if you let it." For the first time since sitting down, Ava looked her mother in the eyes. Her mascara had begun to smudge, and the first tears broke loose down her cheek. But Jeanette didn't reach out, didn't soften or recoil. Ava whispered, "I miss you. Even when I act like I don't, I do." Jeanette exhaled, not in anger, but like air had been stuck in her for years. "I'm not interested in temporary reconciliations or polished brunches with fake smiles," she said. "If you want to find your way back, it won't be in a weekend. It'll be brick by brick, slow and honest." Ava nodded through her tears, holding the envelope like it contained more than paper, like it held the pieces of something she wasn't sure she deserved to put back together. Jeanette stood, the cold biting gently at her coat sleeves. She looked down at her daughter, not above her, not beyond her, just apart from her. "When you're ready," she said, "let me know." Ava blinked. "Ready for what?" Jeanette's voice was soft, unmoving. "To rebuild, brick by brick." Jeanette ends the conversation. "Let me know when you want to rebuild, brick by brick." She never mailed the first one. I never needed to send the second. The envelope stood out in the mail stack, not for its size, but its handwriting. Elegant cursive, unmistakably Ava's, addressee. Not to Mother, not to Ms. Jeanette Parker, but simply Mom. The word alone made Jeanette pause, her keys still in her other hand, her coat unbuttoned and dusted with early November wind. She set the rest of the mail on the foyer table and took the envelope into the kitchen, where the light from the window struck the edge just enough to reveal the faint imprint of what was inside. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she placed it on the counter next to the kettle and began making tea. Earl Grey, hot and steeped the way Henry used to drink it, bitter but calming. As the kettle hissed, she stared at the envelope. Cream paper, no return address, sealed with a circular gold sticker. There was something formal about it, deliberate, ceremonial. But beneath the polish, there was also a pulse, a request. When she finally peeled the flap back, the card inside was modest. No floral borders, no thick gold leaf, just a simple folded note with handwritten lines. "Mom, I don't want this to be a performance. No live stream, no guest list shuffling, no curated posts. This time it's just a dinner. Just family. You're invited if you want to come." "Love?" Ava Jeanette sat down slowly. Tea forgotten. She read it once. Then again. No explanations. No apologies. Just an ask. And an acknowledgement. She looked over at the sideboard, where the first wedding invitation had never arrived. Ava's official day had passed without even a gesture toward her mother's presence. No save the date, no call, not even a stray tag in an Instagram photo. The silence had been surgical. But now, here was the second invitation, not printed by a planner or mailed through a registry. This one had been written by hand, Ava's hand. She thought of the bench conversation, the manila envelope, the way Ava had looked at her, then down at the folder like it was radioactive. She'd said nothing more after Jeanette walked away, but something in her expression had lingered, something unfinished. Jeanette reached for the card again, turning it over slowly. There was no address listed for the dinner, just a date, a time, and a number to RSVP. A real invitation, not for an event, but for presence. She placed the card gently on the table. Her eyes drifted to the mantel, where a small silver frame held a black and white photo of Ava at age 2, chubby cheeks, clutching a blanket, mouth open mid-laugh. Jeanette had taken the picture without meaning to. She'd been learning her first camera, and the image had come out crooked and slightly blurry, but she'd kept it, because it was hers. She looked down at the card one last time, then stood up, moved to the living room, and opened the drawer of the antique hutch she rarely touched. Inside were two things she hadn't known she'd saved: the original "Reserved by Mom" printout from the wedding registry, and a brass photo frame, still wrapped in tissue. She took the frame out, removed the tissue slowly, and set it on the mantel beside the old photo. Then, with careful hands, she slid Ava's new invitation into the frame, unopened, pressed the clasp shut, and stepped back. She didn't need to RSVP, not yet. She needed Ava to understand something first. Invitations were gestures, but legacies were earned. Behind her, the kettle let out one final whistle. Jeanette turned off the stove, poured her tea, and sat down at the kitchen table, letting the steam rise up and warm her face. The card remained untouched in the frame, clean, clear, and waiting. Jeanette frames the invite, unopened. She didn't want me at the wedding, so I became part of her story anyway. The library was quiet in the way only older buildings could be, walls thick with memory, floors that whispered under every step, and a scent that hovered somewhere between old paper and polished wood. Jeanette stepped through the arched glass doors just as the morning sun broke over the rooftops, casting long beams across the tiled entrance and the faded mural of local history that lined the ceiling above. She paused briefly in the vestibule, her gloved fingers trailing across the donor wall just inside the main hall. Dozens of brass nameplates gleamed in staggered rows, some fresh, some tarnished by time. She found hers 2 rows from the bottom. Jeanette L. Parker, in partnership with the Henry E. Parker Memorial Fund, a librarian, young and earnest, offered her a polite smile as she passed, pushing a cart stacked with returned books. Jeanette nodded, not pausing to chat. She didn't come here for attention. She came for legacy. The community room had been converted into a quiet reading lounge, an alcove of armchairs, green banker's lamps, and wide bay windows that looked out onto the yellowing trees of the park across the street. Inside, a handful of people sat scattered among the chairs. An older man slept with a newspaper draped over his lap. A mother hushed her toddler in a rocking chair, but it was the young woman by the corner shelf who held Jeanette's attention. She looked no older than 20. Long sleeves pushed to the elbows, dark curls piled into a loose bun, a leather backpack half unzipped on the floor by her feet. She stood just inches from the new bronze plaque mounted on the wood-paneled wall. Jeanette stepped closer, quietly, careful not to disturb the moment. The woman was reading, slowly, lips moving slightly as she mouthed each word. The Henry E. Parker Women's Opportunity Grant, established to support first-generation college students pursuing degrees in applied sciences, dedicated by Jeanette L. Parker in honor of her husband and in memory of every woman whose potential went unseen. The young woman exhaled softly, then reached into her bag, pulled out a notebook, and scribbled something down. Jeanette didn't speak. She didn't need to. She simply watched. That grant hadn't been Ava's idea. But at one time, Ava had hoped her name would be the one etched into a future building, the face behind a legacy, the pillar of a new branch in the family tree. She'd wanted spotlight, What Jeanette built instead was foundation, quiet, strong, enduring. She stepped back and sat in one of the velvet armchairs nearby, letting her eyes adjust to the soft lamplight and the gentle weight of the moment. She could hear the subtle rustle of book pages, the low hum of the HVAC system, the creak of wood as someone shifted their weight across the room. Every sound felt earned. Jeanette opened her tote and pulled out a folder, just thin, a single sheet inside. It was a copy of the original trust summary, the one she'd carried back and forth to every meeting with Geller. At the top, next to Trustee Jeanette Parker, was a note handwritten in ink, finalized, archived, irrevocable. She folded it once, slid it back into her bag, and looked out the tall window beside her. Across the street, she could see children being led in a group from the elementary school, their coats half-buttoned and their shoes scuffing the sidewalk. They reminded her of field trips she'd once chaperoned, peanut butter sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, Ava tugging at her sleeve, pointing at things with innocent awe. She didn't ache anymore. She remembered. And that was the difference. Her phone buzzed once in her coat pocket. She didn't reach for it. She knew who it might be. Ava, maybe. Or maybe not. It didn't matter. Not today. She stood, took one last look at the girl still reading the plaque, and smiled. They could exclude her from the pictures, silence her in speeches, and write her out of bridal scripts. But they couldn't erase the structure she'd laid beneath them. They couldn't strip her from the foundation. She had become part of the story anyway. I wasn't at the wedding. I became unforgettable anyway.